Welcome to Capacity4dev Podcast Series, a space where international cooperation professionals share good practices and tips from the field and much more. On today's podcast, we welcome Natalia Gomez from Costa Rica. Natalia, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Natalia Gomez. I'm from Costa Rica, and I'm the former Special Advisor on Youth to the EU Commissioner on International Partnerships, Jutta Urpilainen. A bit about myself. I'm 26 years old, and I'm an environmental engineer with a focus in climate adaptation, disaster risk reduction, and participatory processes, especially youth engagement. And I'm also a climate advocate. I have collaborated in climate action and youth participation advocacy since 2019, for example, by co-funding and chairing until 2022 the Costa Rican Youth and Climate Change Network, and also by co-chairing the NDC Partnership Youth Task Force for the development of a youth engagement plan in 2020. I'm also co-founder and currently a member of the advisory committee of the Youth Network for Disaster Risk Reduction of the Americas and the Caribbean. And I participate in a local advocacy group in Costa Rica. I have also worked in climate change adaptation with different organizations. And currently, I'm doing a master's in international land and water management at Wageningen University.
Why is it important, you think, to have young people in similar roles to the one you had in DG INTPA?
First, I definitely think that we need more of this type of roles, but together with quantity, we need quality regarding youth meaningful engagement. Roles that take seriously the opinions of young people to enrich the policies, roles that value your inputs and consider them. These type of roles give you a direct contact with decision makers. In my case, with the Commissioner Urpilainen, who is a strong advocate for education and youth participation. That role also allows you to develop proposals, suggestions based on your previous experiences and your perspectives. Moreover, it allows you to constantly provide feedback and suggestions from an external and youth point of view, adding value and benefiting the continuous improvement of the policies for young people. Before me, there was a special advisor from Africa in 2021, Britannia, and a special advisor from Asia, Kira, in 2022. And considering the growing youth population around the world, it is very relevant that the decisions, strategies, plans, programs, and projects consider and prioritize young people's voices. In my case, I provided advice on youth engagement to make the EU external action more participatory and effective for young people in partner countries based on my experiences in LAC. Also, I provided advice to shape the Youth Empowerment Fund with a priority that it reaches the grassroots organizations and avoids the common administrative barriers for youth organizations looking for funding. And I provided advice for the EU LAC Youth Day in the framework of the EU CELAC Summit, as well as leading the development of the EU LAC Youth Day recommendations. Looking back, I'm happy with my contributions. I think I share as many proposals and suggestions as possible, both to the Commissioner and DG INTPA Youth Team. And I hope that the role with which I had the honor to collaborate is maintained and continues to be useful in bringing priorities from the youth directly to the Commissioner.
What is the EU currently doing to strengthen the development of youth skills?
I can talk about some initiatives, especially the ones with which I was closer when I was a special advisor, because there are many, and I think that we need even more, as skills development and education are the base for transformation, are the base for action. I can start highlighting the Global Youth Sounding Board, which is a platform with young leaders, activists, and professionals that have an influence on the EU external action and international partnerships. But at the same time, it is a space with a continuous learning process between all the members, involving a process of capacity building and skills development. And I had the pleasure to share and work with them during my period. These platforms have a scalable and replicable effect. Also, some of the youth representatives that I interviewed consider being part of these platforms as an opportunity to share knowledge, to train other young people based on the training they have received. And another point is that through these structures, the EU can facilitate the contact with decision makers and policy makers in the countries. I remember that it was mentioned in different times how the local youth sounding boards facilitate a connection, therefore advocacy with ministers, ambassadors, the commissioner, among others. One of the main challenges mentioned during those interviews is regarding the lack of funding for project development by young people for young people. And this connects me with the other initiative, which is the Youth Empowerment Fund, which was launched last year. These are funding structures composed by microgrants to support innovative youth-led projects addressing local challenges. I was involved during the previous phase, the phase of the design of the structure, and personally, and based on my previous experiences, the main goal with this fund is that it could respond to local needs and the priorities of the grassroots organizations, because there are many youth initiatives that target, for example, capacity building and skills development, but unfortunately, few of them are properly remunerated. And I think that the Youth Empowerment Fund is a milestone which looks to support initiatives in climate action and sustainability and initiatives that consider underrepresented groups. And some of my main collaborations or contributions were regarding the governance structure, the relevance to strengthen communication and capacity development in the underrepresented regions that are applying to the fund, then the dissemination of the fund information in various languages and through different channels, because it is important that it reaches as many young people as possible. Also, I remember I mentioned as a good practice to develop an open process of capacity building for the creation or development of the proposals. And I think that the Youth Empowerment Fund is a window of opportunity to support the emerging and ongoing youth initiatives in climate action and sustainability. I imagine that many of those projects will be related to training, skills development, and education in critical areas such as green skills, innovation, action on the ground, among others. And the investment in youth, skills development, education projects is essential, considering that it is the base for critical transformation, and education is an investment with impact, scalability, and higher return.
So there are a lot of different initiatives, and that's great, but do you think that more can be done?
Well, first, based on my experience as special advisor on youth, I think that regarding the local Youth Sounding Board series, it's important to establish minimum guidelines for the EU delegations around or about the expected activities of the local youth advisory structures in terms of youth engagement, empowerment, and connection. I think that those guidelines can clearly specify what is expected from the structures, how those structures could work, what is expected from the EU delegations, for example, and which are those minimum actions to ensure meaningful youth participation and a connection to advise the EU delegations. Another point is the generation of a regional network of youth sounding boards for constant exchange, connection, and development of collaborations between the people that are part of the different structures in different countries, and also the development of monitoring, evaluation, and learning systems around the local YSBs for constant learning, and both for young people and officers. A second point, as I mentioned before, I participated in the EU LAC Youth Day recommendations document development, which is composed by 12 suggestions or recommendations. Some recommendations related to skills development and education were, for example, to guarantee the political participation and advocacy of children and young people, for the creation of public policies by providing capacity building, education for democracy, and the exercise of citizenship. Another was to facilitate access to funding and skills development for youth, small organizations, entrepreneurships, and business, and to provide training and technical institutional support for them to become self-sustaining. And another recommendation was to ensure the access to quality and intercultural formal and popular education, including education for peace building, conflict transformation, comprehensive integral sexuality education, and environmental education, considering individual and contextual capacities. Just as an example, I mentioned those, which are very relevant. I think it is needed to follow up those 12 recommendations and to evaluate their progress, for example, for the next EU Select Summit, which is going to be held in the next year. I think it is needed to promote constant connection and exchange between the EU-LAC youth organizations by establishing a formal EU-LAC youth collaboration platform or network as an organization that allows regional exchange of knowledge, dialogue opportunities, follow-up, and joint construction between EU-LAC or youth organizations. This platform could constantly advocate for the meaningful inclusion of youth in different spaces and provide adequate follow-up to the decisions. I think that I have to mention financing for skills development projects. Unfortunately, I think that sometimes the role of the software sector can be undervalued because it is not as visible as projects that involve infrastructure, for example. And every time we see how the funding of this type of self-initiatives is reduced, we see how the skills development, capacity building, or education could be undervalued. So I think it is important that their funding continues to ensure that those initiatives are maintained, and especially to support the youth-led and local organizations' initiatives.
When implementing projects about young people, what should international cooperation professionals keep in mind? What's your, let's say, advice to them?
I want to remind us as the main takeaway to integrate young people into the different plans, programs, and projects. For instance, including initiatives in training, capacity building for activism, citizen participation, green skills, and advocacy focused on young people. This can be repetitive, but although we always mention it, we continue seeing how the spaces have an underrepresentation of young people. Just look at the percentages in the governments and parliaments, for example. 5 main takeaways that I could mention could be like, first of all, engage youth since the design of the projects, not just call the young people when everything is already decided. At second point, support youth-led initiatives, those initiatives that are from youth to youth, from the perspective of young people for young people. And third point, don't leave the components associated with the skills development and education out of the projects. It is fundamental to have the tools and continue with the action. Fourth point, avoid tokenism. Let's work on meaningful youth engagement. And fifth point, funding opportunities for youth initiatives.
Great to have you here with us today, Natalia. Thank you so much for sharing so many things with us. And I would say just good luck with your future endeavors and with your degree.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share some reflections on youth engagement. And I am happy to continue discussing. Thanks a lot.
Visit capacity4dev.europa.eu and join more than 10,000 international cooperation professionals worldwide. Share your knowledge, learn from others, collaborate globally.